Of course, dummy. They know they're only guys with real good taste can stand to be around this junk. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Hey there, everybody. It's Crimson King again. I'm looking to try and bring more new players into this game. And with that, I'm going to try and build content focused on what new players would enjoy seeing. And hopefully, this first topic kind of sets the groundwork needed to make sure future topics and encounters, fleets, expeditions, that kind of thing have a good set of like standards for folks to play off of. Plus, I want these sort of tutorial style tuna school videos to be evergreen, something useful regardless of the meta changes. I'm not going to go into like specific fits and things like that. I'm trying to do this more for the long haul. So, with that, let's go to school. The topic for this first episode is going to be base management. I'm going to talk a bit about why logistics matters and what base management basically amounts to, what it allows you to do. I'm going to talk about the different staging bases for tuna school events in the future and the benefits that come from like actively planning out and plotting your overarching strategy and operations. I'm going to talk a little bit about hunting people and being hunted by people and what that kind of means. There's a little bit of shadow play going on behind the scenes. And then I'll go into scheduling for if you guys want to fly with me, just hit me up and let's fleet. I've also got a pretty good outline of future topics that I want to cover. And then the last slide of every one of these briefings is going to be a different YouTube channel that I learned from. And maybe you'll enjoy too. All the art provided on these actually comes from a new AI bot that like one of my buds, Chaos, found called NeuroLove, and just the art style behind it is really cool. And then you'll see like there's some weird blending and mixing, but it has like different styles. So this is the sci-fi genre style with pirates is what I plugged in with a bunch of other little mini details, but it spits out some pretty rad art, and hopefully that's enough to at least carry the day. Let's get into why logistics matters. Now, logistics is not what you think it is. If you are experienced in Eve or Eve Online, when you hear Logi, you think healer, basically. But logistics is a lot more complicated than that. Logistics is providing supply for operations. So getting resource A to position B so you can perform a specific operation using those resources. And attrition is a part of that. You lose resources as you go, so it helps to have backup ships, refits, helps to have backup everything, basically. If you have a workhorse, something that you want to use on the regular, having multiples of that workhorse means that even if you get killed, you've got something else you can use. And as a result, it becomes very important how you position your forces. A lot of ratters, for example, battleship pilots, will post up in high-sec islands and basically do their best to stay put as much as possible. They are not roamers, they are not rangers in those specific ships because, too high of a risk to leave those little islands. Different goals for logistics in general. Organizing and equipping your forces. Now, your forces could be you, it could be your alts, it could be your friends, and to a lesser extent, it could be your enemies. If you sell above market prices at specific stores, you are advertising to other players, hey, there's life out here. You should be buying these and then either using them. It's sort of a challenge. We'll give you the guns that you're going to use against us. Or you should be buying these just to save the trip to Jeddah. So you're targeting both the lazy and the opposition. It's kind of a twofold benefit to trying to sell outside of Jeddah. And you usually want to go in small doses. If you try and do like a batch sale, Jeddah will drastically undercut you every time to make sure that they're getting their cut. So there are little levers and things that you can use on the market while outfitting and equipping and selling the things that you don't need to outfit and equip with. I like to organize my general strategy between 3 locations. I've got sort of a home base, a work base, and a vacation home base. But you should set up the kind of environment that you want to live in. If you want everything focused on one specific home, then localize everything there. You'll find it gets a little boring once you get used to the routines and the operations that occur around you. But if you stay in a place long enough, you get kind of a feel for the crowd that lives there. Um, Another important thing that kind of logistics leads into is the use of not necessarily bases in nullsec, but bases on the borders of nullsec. I like to call them customs bases. And there's also the use of NPC bases within nullsec too. Those can be good customs locations because those are never at risk. Uh, they are at risk of being gate camped or being bubbled and blockaded, but that's why you have a variety of different kinds of ships that you can use as one of your, hopefully, fleet design goals. And also, you want the stuff that you put into storage to be relatively easy to liquidate if things go pear-shaped. So, what do I mean by customs bases? Those are, think of them as like stockpiles, holding piles that you can yeet ships to on the regular. So you basically just create a supply line from JITA to whatever customs base you have set up, and just make continuous shopping runs from JITA to that base, from JITA to that base, and then transfer over to either a more talented or skilled fit ship or pilot to transfer those across the borderlands. And you can handle that all on your own. You can handle that with a team. That's just, it's a matter of positioning the ball and then kicking it out into the void to avoid piracy as much as possible. Or if you're on the flip side, to use piracy as much as possible. I'm surprised more pirates aren't placing orders for delivery out of ITCs. If you just load up an order with Tritanium, some poor schmuck is going to try and move that. And maybe not. Maybe you're out, a couple 100,000 ISK, but who doesn't have that lying around? Anyway, there are two different strategies just in general. Well, there's a lot of different strategies, but there's two main buckets. And I've talked about this a little bit on the Keep It Brief, but I'm gonna touch on it again. There's going deep versus going wide. Going deep is stacking your base near enough to a central location that you can react and move your forces as you see fit. Maybe you've got, sovereignty that you're looking to take care of. You can stack everything that you have in that sov. But assuming that stuff that you have stacked in there isn't big enough to take on everything in the galaxy, and it won't be, but you can pick your fights for the most part. If that falls, you've got to rebuy everything. You've got to pay that fee, that transport fee from the fallen Sov to the nearest base or ITC, and it is painful losing that much stuff to just a building going down. Whereas if you go wide, you want to limit your exposure to risk, but you're also limited on, time to gather resources and positioning, and all of your ships might not necessarily be where you want them. So there's a lot of maintenance and upkeep and logistics that goes into getting ships where they need to be. So there is no 100% right answer for every situation. It's a matter of understanding what your goals are and then building your strategy to match those. Space is big, yo. So here are some recommended bases for your first supply line. I'm going to have homework in these episodes too for folks to, pat yourself on the back for accomplishing an arbitrary and minor goal if you enjoy the show. But what I'd like you to do, if you're in TUNA, or if you want to be a part of TUNA school, you don't have to be a part of the corporation to take part in the events. In fact, I hope that we get ganked on the regular, because that's good content and people should be fighting. But I want you to build your first supply line. Everybody buys their stuff from JITA. That's known, that's a given. But you don't have to build your first base at JITA. I mean, the rent there for corporate hangars is silly expensive. You can build your home or your shopping stockpile, as it were, in one of the neighboring systems or nearby. Tama, if you like to PvP, having Tama as your main, like, I'm going to stockpile all of my Jita purchases in Tama and then ship them out to other bases as needed. That is a good, decent place to start. I have a very empty and sparse base in Jita that I keep for measuring reprocessing rates. And that's about it. Anything that I buy there, I don't keep there because it is too easy to hit sell all or move all compared to actually actively managing that from afar, right? I'd rather be able to move the items around in my inventories where those items are closest to the fight. That way it's just purchase, move it, position it, fit it, send it, pick up the pieces, smile and laugh. My main base for most of my operations, pretty much everything that I do on my own, is out of Ostingale. And that's with intent. Ostingale has a little bit of everything. It's a low-sec ITC, directly adjacent to several high-sec locations, also a range of low-sec locations, and then Syndicate space. You've got null-sec right there. It is central enough that it doesn't go too far out of the way if I were to set my autopilot to safest for Ned, Kunara, Sindaya, any of those fringe ports going into null. And I keep a good set of stockpiles in each of these, depending on operational tempo and like the different paces that TUNA, the corporation, sets. So I recommend organizing your hangars in a way that makes sense to you. In a way that makes sense to me, I've got 4 hangars in each of my bases, or at least as close to 4 hangars as I can get, based on the number of NPC stations and associated hangars in those locations. So for example, in Ostingale, my main base is the Ostingale ITC. Cold storage is one of the other NPC stations nearby. That's where I keep all of my long-term investments, all of my story items, gravitational wave graphs, and when I'm not actively hunting for them, secret trafficking containers. Also other investment items. There's a bunch of other stuff in there that you think like that scene in Indiana Jones where there's all those boxes at the very end and they store the Ark in there. That is what I view cold storage as. You put the stuff that you're not going to touch for months at a time. Then I've got the industrial warehouse where I keep most of my mining equipment, my rocks, my minerals. Though those minerals, if they stay there very long, they're not doing work. So I try and keep my resources and assets moving as much as humanly possible, because with every one of those moves, they get closer to a sale, and that is how I make the bulk of my income. There's ratting too, but the big sales, the big prizes, comes from actually selling those, either the products of the ratting or the products from industry. And then I've got a war chest. This is where I put all of my fittings, all of my ships that are not yet fit, all of the toys that I know I want to use someday in the future, but I just can't be asked to build them quite yet. And the TUNA hangars match that and mirror that to an extent. They're not one for one, but that's just a system that I found that works. Whatever organizational system works for you, use it. Like, I know some folks who divide their lives into either aggressive or defensive tools. Or they design their organizational structures around like resources that need to move versus resources that can need to be sorted and processed. There are different ways. This is one of those things where, like, do it the way that makes sense for you. This is just the way that makes sense for me. Moving on. So, when hunting people, it is important that you have the tools at hand needed to actually bring down your target. And in order to do that, you need to know, first off, you need to know what targets you're going up against. You need to establish a fit and build that hits those target profiles. So if you're hunting in low sec, say you're hunting newbie miners or bots, you don't really need as much as you would in, say, nullsec, where everybody's blinged out and fitted to the nines. or depending on like the area and activity of the space, right? You might need more tackle for heavier miners, or you might need, just a dictor, and that'll make all their stabs completely useless. You need to get the tools needed to solve the problems in a position where they're readily at hand, right? So having those lines of supply, moving the toys that you want to the places where you think you might need to use them, not necessarily where you're going to use them, because if you put all of your eggs in one basket, if you have everything in one base, and something cuts off your access to that base, you're SOL, buddy. You are a Feddo among the hounds and in deep trouble. Let's see. Primary content providers. Okay, so if you advertise that there are miners in the area by posting rocks for sale, you can draw other hunters and potentially other miners to those areas, or you can scare off the miners or the industrialists. It really depends on the pricing, the mass, and how the market reacts, how the other players in this beautiful game see your signals and your signs. And that's human sign on a strategic level. Human sign on an operational level would be the old way of hunting before scanners came out, right? If you go into a system that has a certain number of gates, you would expect to see a certain number of either mining belts or pirate anomalies. And I think it's about 10 for pirate anomalies in general, if and the refresh rate is faster depending on the number of gates. If you exceed 10, it means that there's heavy player activity in there. If you are below 10, it also means that there's heavy player activity in there. So pick your targets wisely. And that being above 10 doesn't necessarily mean that there are people actively playing. It just means that they have the resources to host anomalies that they're not using and they're not, putting to work for them. They have not efficiently utilized the resources at hand, right? Their fields have gone fallow to an extent. So just because you see more doesn't mean that it is fertile hunting grounds. Unless you are hunting PvE targets, in which case, they ain't using the main obs. Stick around a bit. See what the traffic's like. See what their response times are like. Gather intel. Have adventures in dangerous space. And hopefully your logistics can supply multiple different iterations of those adventures for when you inevitably wind up in a pod. So other levels of human sign, tactical, obviously red scans. If you find a POS with people inside, they might just be hanging out. They might just be using an emulator to keep their game up. Or they might be watching you, watching them. There's the only real way to find out is to try a conversation, poke them, see what the reactions are, ask them how their day's going, man. Like, most of the fun that I've had in this game is just from talking random nonsense to pilots in space. And there's ways to, weaponize that, but mostly it's with positive intent. Like, I want to make friends in this game, and hopefully other people do as well. It is all about the multiplayer in this massively multiplayer online experience. So your homework for this lesson, it's a very short episode, and hopefully most of them in the future are. Whereas the Keep It Brief wants to talk about everything in as much detail as possible, as short and quick as possible. Tuna School is going to be about deep diving on specific subjects and trying to tackle them in as much detail as I can get. Because there's a flow to this, right? The logistics move the ships to the locations where the operations occur. The operations either are successful and bring in kill mails, or they are less than successful and bring in lessons. And that is the gameplay loop. Like, you lick your wounds and you sell your goods and you buy your goods and you bring them back and you have a good time. Like, that is fundamentally how Echoes works. So your homework for this session is to create for your first base. If you've got all those trainers in random locations all across LoSec, consolidate them. Put them in one location. If you don't use them and if you have no intention of ever using them again, maybe think about selling them, right? Clean up your room. Clean out the garage. Make sure you've got the tools at hand that you want to use. And don't be afraid to experiment with some of the old stuff. I've pulled up Stabber trainers and messed around with those a few times in the past just to see, like, how good is this ship or how bad is this ship? What is the maximum that it can pull off? And then create your first deployment zone, whether that's a deployment zone for miners or for PvE or for PvP. Put more than one fit of a specific kind of ship in the location where you want to use it, or at least nearby, right? If you don't want to like post up inside your hunting grounds, you want to be nearby so that you can surprise people as they get going. Uh, Find a base that suits that need. Alcoves are pretty good for hiding out, but remember that ratters and other people like to hide in those. Sometimes your best bet is just a way station along the route, along a pipe. And then create your first supply line between the two. So you've got Jita to your first base to your first deployment zone, which should, if you want to go hard mode, it should be on the border of nullsec somewhere. Or if you want to go take it a little bit easier, slower pace, somewhere in low sec that is relatively untrammeled, that should do. And with that, scheduling moving forward, I'm going to try and do this every Friday. We will see how that goes. It should be short, sweet, and to the point since it's one topic, but I like to talk. But my schedule as it stands currently, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays are where you're most likely to catch me. Those are the days where I have the least going on. And I'm going to try and do a few more social engagements just because, like, I got to get out of the house every now and then, y'all. But for the most part, if you want to fly with me on one of those days, poke me. Let's set a time aside, and I'll do my best to make it. Come fly with me. The goal is to get weekly episodes out, like I said, and then TUNA as a corporation, and I don't know about y'all's other corporations, but we try and have activities going at least once a day. We have some form of content going, dependent on time zone. So if you're a part of TUNA, keep an eye out on the Discord for those. Future episodes, here's what we got on the docket. I'm going to cover privateering next just because it is about as basic as it gets. That's basically ratting and PvE with the flavor of PvP added on there. If you don't expect to get ganked, you will be surprised every time you get ganked and learn nothing from it. Go in expecting to be ganked, and I'll talk more about that probably next Friday. And then PI, that was foundational to building up the wealth that I currently have, which probably not a significant amount by most measures, but I think significant enough for me. I am comfortable at the level of play I'm rocking, and planetary interaction is the main reason why. I'm going to talk about battle buddies for the third week. The goal is to get kind of a rotation going of basic, sort of playful, extra playful, and just keep that going, right? So basic, you want to have a good battle rhythm and attitude. Basic standards and doctrine and you. And then a little bit more playful, basic exploration, because you never know what you're going to find out there, right? Like, you can know what you're specifically looking for, but there's no guarantee you'll stumble across it unless, it's something you've seen before, and that's kind of counterproductive when it comes to exploration, right? And then in a couple of months, after 8 episodes, probably episode 9, I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything. There is a link in the doobly-doo to a Google form where you can post whatever question or topic you want me to talk about in these future episodes, and I'll work them into the rotation. I want this to be a service to all pilots across Eve Echoes, not just TUNA. And as a result, like, ask me your questions, right? And if I don't know the answer, I will ask others for the answer. I have rewards to give out now that I'm a content creator. I don't rightly know how to do it. I think I just supply NetEase with the ID tag of the person who I deem fit for a month of Omega. But because of that, I want to try and tailor content towards new players. So if there's anything incorrect in anything that I publish, anything wrong in this episode, and you can convince me that it's wrong, which, I mean, I'm a stubborn son of a cuss, but I like to think of myself as reasonable. Present the evidence and I will believe it if it seems believable. But if you correct me on anything, you automatically get a month of Omega in my book. I will gladly hand over the code or pull up your code and plug you in, because, like, I want to get better. I want to learn this game just as much as I hope others want to learn this game. And the same is true for people helping new players. If I see someone answer a question in a thoughtful and in-depth manner that actually promotes better play in a new player, like this happens all the time on Reddit, I want to dish out a reward for that. Because those little mini tutorials, like, those are worth highlighting. Just because they're tucked away in alcoves doesn't mean they don't have extreme value. It just means they don't have a lot of eyes on them. And maybe the folks who need those questions answered haven't had a chance to look at them, or haven't put in the effort to find them. I'm hoping to provide some positive incentive towards the folks willing to make the effort. And with that, let's talk about extra credit. If you like my content, I would like to point you in the direction of people who do the kind of things that I enjoy, but much better, to a much more professional standard, like way more detailed, way more interesting. And it would behoove me to start with anybody other than Mr. Sci-Fi himself, Isaac Arthur. Isaac Arthur's YouTube channel is amazing. I have explored distant galaxies in Elite Dangerous, made the trek from Sol to Sagittarius A star, listening to his episodes, his YouTube videos, about an hour a chunk, about an hour a session. And they are in depth. They have a certain humor to them. They are beautifully illustrated. He has such a charming, like, disposition and way with words. I absolutely adore everything that he produces, and maybe you will too. If you like Eve Echoes and you want to get a little bit further down the sci-fi rabbit hole, well, he is the Mad Hatter of the sci-fi rabbit hole, as far as I can tell. And with that, I have covered everything for this first Tuna School. I'm going to go and do Friday night things. Wish me luck out in the wild, eh? I hope you all have a good one, and I look forward to talking to you next Friday.